The weather was reminding us that fall is on its way out, but I guess spring is on its way in. But well, at least we're not in Buffalo. I hope you've been enjoying the Schemel offerings this semester and will be equally, if not more, pleased with our spring offerings. That's always the aim. Today we are privileged to have with us Dr. Judith Renyi, an esteemed friend and colleague who has been doing groundbreaking work in education since I've known her, which is a long time ago. She now serves as the Executive Director of the Mayor's Commission on Literacy in Philadelphia. As we know, literacy is an issue to be dealt with at every level, from the local to the global. And as we focus here today on world affairs, she will be talking to some extent about how we in the U.S., the richest and arguably the most democratic country in the world, fare compared to other nations with regard to literacy. Unfortunately, we have fallen back just at a time when we know how devastating that is to individuals and to our society. Dr. Renyi will reveal to us why we are slipping and how our U.S. Department of Education is responding to the workforce development crisis and the innovations piloted in Philadelphia to reskill American adults on a large scale. The focus of her work in the Commission is adult work readiness for Philadelphia's large undereducated population. She brings to that daunting task the energy and creativity that is in evidence in all that she does. Dr. Renyi was a dean at NYU and later at Rosemont College, an advisor on education to the National Science Foundation and the National Endowment for the Humanities, and a founding member of the Board of Directors of Grantmakers for Education. With all of that and much more, she is a serious amateur cellist who continues to play with small chamber groups whenever and wherever she can. Anyone up for it? Please welcome her to the podium.
Sandra and I do go way back, and I always do what she tells me to do, and that's always guided me well. So thank you so much for your dear friendship and our long acquaintance, and Maury too. I'm just excited to be here. What a gorgeous university this is. This is just stunning. I hope you're all as proud of it as you can be. So let's move this along. Is this my clicker? Is this the clicker? Okay, and how do I know? Okay. Just a year ago, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is an organization that's primarily composed of first world countries. So Europe, the United States, Japan, Canada, that's what OECD is primarily. And they do have some Central European countries that are coming along and developing along with it. They have excluded Russia. They were thinking about including Russia, but when that Ukraine thing happened, they decided not so much. So OECD did a major study called PIAC to its friends. It stands for the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies, and published their findings a year ago. Now, this is a study that has been done a number of times in the past, but there are some new twists that happened in the study that they produced in 2013. They studied 33 first world countries, including the US and Canada and Great Britain, et cetera, et cetera. In each of those countries, they conducted in-home, in-depth interviews with 5,000 adults, okay, selected in such a way to get a good spread. They were 16 years old to 65. So these are adults out of school and looking for work or in the workforce. This is a study of workforce readiness in literacy. And after the in-depth interviews with these people, they then assessed those 5,000 people in each of the 33 countries. The results of which I'm going to take a look. These are the three major areas that were discussed in the interviews and assessed on the assessments. Reading and writing, literacy. Numeracy, the ability to do various kinds of mathematics. And a new item, this last one was new for the first time in the PX studies that have been done, the ability to solve problems in a technology-rich environment. And the reason that was added was that globally, you've got to be with the digital knowledge economy or you're not going to be with the economy at all. So it was a study to see how were these countries doing in these three areas. The United States did not, surprisingly, do very well. Okay? In fact, we placed 4 countries below average in literacy and 7 places lower than the Slovak Republic. And I think any time the United States comes up in these kinds of studies and we're 7 places behind the Slovak Republic, we really ought to sit up and take notice. I want you to tell me who placed at the top. Which country of all the developed? Sweden's high. Who else? Highest. Japan. Okay. Consistently at the top of the list. Sweden did pretty well. Which country do you think made the greatest advances between 10 years ago, the last time this was done, and last year? Which country do you think rose up the highest? Which country looked at their results 10 years ago and said, whoops, I don't like this, let's do something about it? Finland. Finland. Finland has a habit of taking studies like this very seriously and saying, I don't like this, we have to do better if we're going to be globally competitive. Finland took a look at the results and did something about it. The United States did not. In fact, we slipped a little bit in our standings. We're a little bit below where we had been 10 years ago. Now, this is hard to read. Those of you who have the paper copies, you might want to turn to what this says. Starting in the late 90s, this shows the changes in job growth and job decline. The climbing blue graph line is occupations that increased the number of jobs available for people with higher education, tertiary education, meaning that they had higher education credentials. The 2 lines here that declined, the worst is occupations with low educated workers declined the most, and occupations with medium level credentials also declined. So just having a high school diploma or a little bit of college, you are going to be in a group of people that's larger, chasing after fewer jobs. And if you're in low-skilled occupations, a low-skilled adult, your life is really, really not going to be good at all. Now remember, these are developed nations. So what happened here is we exported, all of those nations exported their low-skilled jobs to other countries. Okay? So ordinary manufacturing and a lot of other industries, the garment industry, et cetera, that goes on in non-OECD countries. Okay? And we increased our jobs in the highest, for the highest educated people. And this gives you a picture, you know, when we're talking about the economic divide that's yawning gap now in our country. This is also true in other developed countries as well. But this is a major, major problem, and it's at the root of something that we need to worry about a great deal. So what's happening is that we are not competitive in this country globally. And this first piece of information is the most worrying part of this, is that our 16 to 24-year-olds are doing worse relative to their elders in this country and to 16 to 24-year-olds in other developed nations. That's very worrying. We're not doing a better job with young people. We're doing a worse job, and comparatively to the other developed nations. It's a very, very great concern, and one which we really need to pay very serious attention to. This study showed 12% of adults can read at the levels required for those good jobs, the ones that you can support a family on and put a roof over your head and feel that you've done well by yourself and your kids. Only 8% of our adults can qualify for those jobs nationally in mathematics. 1/3 of our populace can solve problems using technology, but 1/3 cannot. And it's not just solving problems. We have a huge digital divide as well in this country. So I know, it's sobering, isn't it? In our country, there's a direct correlation between education skills, wages, and health. Okay? And Black and Hispanic people are way overrepresented in the lowest levels of literacy. So we're getting a really unpleasant picture of where we stand in relation to our own people and to those in other countries. You know, it's kind of interesting, if I go back to this other information, we are a magnet country for tertiary education, for higher education globally. Our colleges are being filled with so many international students, and our colleges and universities are opening campuses up in many foreign countries, in China, in Riyadh, you name it. We're exporting higher education and importing our college students and graduate students and all sorts of very highly educated people. But our own populace is struggling very, very hard to qualify for higher education. So it's also something to be thinking about as we're thinking about this. We also import many immigrants who can give a strong push to our economy through their diversity, through their enterprise, and through their eagerness for what makes America great, including education. So there's a little bit of balance there, but on the whole, with our own population, our native-born population, not so much. So what's the United States' response to this information so far since this report came out in 2013? And are we going to beat Finland at their game is a question we should ask ourselves, and we should be making a lot of noise about. So the immediate response was a paper that came out called Time to Upskill. And you can find that on the web if you'd like to read all the detail on that. And by the way, the PIAC website has now put some fantastic infographics up on their website. So if you like to have fun playing with numbers, you can decide which numbers you want to compare to and pull that up and get all the whiz-bang out of it yourself. A lot of fun to increase your technological skills and play with the data. So we now know, extrapolating from the study, 36 million American workers and working age people are not just below the level of competency expected for the good jobs, they're below the lowest rung of the lowest level, entry-level jobs in the United States of America. 36 million. And the situation has gotten worse, and we have less money being spent by federal and state sources than we have had in the past. And in fact, one example is the Department of Labor used to fund a substantial amount of money for education of people who were on welfare, on TANF, on temporary assistance to needy families. And in 2011, the program was axed. They stopped it. So now you have a situation where somebody's on welfare and the welfare system is geared toward getting them out the door and into a job within 90 days of their start on support, but they're not going to get any education while they're on TANF. And in fact, if in the state of Pennsylvania, this is something you can all do, okay, would you please make your voices heard to the governor-elect? Some of the rules around TANF are written at the state level. And in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, participating in educational activities is not considered an activity that's going to help you find a job. So there's a disincentive in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This is not a federal rule, this is a state level rule, a disincentive to pursuing more education or training in order to qualify for a decent job. So it's nutty, we're going to have to change that. Please write to your representatives and let them know that, let's get real, people. Let's get real about what makes people unemployable in this country. Okay. So all of the federal and state money makes a seat available, makes only 2 million seats available in classrooms for adult learners to improve their education and move them up a little bit in the ranks. But we have 36 million. Now, one class, if you're reading at 5th grade level, if you're reading and doing math at 6th grade level, if you're reading and doing math at 4th grade level, and the lowest level for getting a good job is 10th, okay? One class isn't going to do it, all right? So our response nationally to supporting education for this huge population is inadequate, to say the least. We can't continue to ignore this issue, and we need to, I'm going to make a request of all of you. This is not about fixing the schools. This is about fixing the adults. I guarantee you, fix the adults, make them employable, and their kids will do better in school, and their kids will do better in general. I was in school reform K-12 most of my career. That's where I met Sandra. And I concluded after 20 years of banging my head against recalcitrant school systems and the whole way public education is organized, that we couldn't fix poverty a classroom at a time in the schools. We needed to fix poverty by putting the parents to work. We had to address the chaos that children go home to in families where their parents are unemployable. So I'm very happily now in charge of doing that for the city of Philadelphia, and I'm going to win. So one of the things that Time to Reskill report called for was, they said, we're going to need innovation. We need innovation to address this issue. And I think that coming from the background I come from, innovation also means we've got to figure out how to scale up education in terms of availability for the neediest people that we have among us. And we also need to accelerate their learning. We can't be looking at years-long courses semester-long courses where people drop in and out, and let me give you a picture of that. Most of the data I've looked at, and we cover ESL, English as a second language, as well as adult basic education, and both at the equivalent of elementary level as well as secondary in Philadelphia. And most literacy organizations do attend to ESL as well. ESL learners, you have an 85% retention rate in the classes. These are highly motivated learners. They've come to this country, they want to work, they want to make a life for them and their families, they want to do better, and they know they got to get the English language skills in order to do that. So you've got a terrific attendance rate and completion rate and acceleration rate of people learning the language and achieving this skill. And believe me, English is a tough language. It is a horribly difficult language for a non-native to learn. I have gone on record as saying that there are two things I could do in the United States to improve literacy and numeracy. One, we will all learn to read in Italian. And two, we're only learning the metric system, and the hell with those British measures, okay? Now, seriously, those two things, the difficult, all of the exceptions to the rules. English is a mongrel language. It is comprised of so many different language streams in both grammatically as well as vocabulary. And its huge number of idiosyncratic phrases and approaches where a single, prepositional phrase can go up, down, and sideways. It's crazy language to try to learn. My hat is off to every immigrant who accomplishes this unbelievable task and masters it. But come on, guys, can we get with metric? I mean, this is ridiculous. We're supposed to be a first world country, and we're not metric. We're still teaching those crazy measures and units. So, and this is also why people have such trouble in this country with decimals. They don't come across decimals in their daily lives until they hit 5th grade, and that's where they drop out. So, innovation for me means scalability and acceleration. And I've had a lot of experience in looking at the way technology can do both of those things. I've worked with a lot of programs for adult learning that were online programs. And the theory and practice says a couple of things about adult learners. Don't make adult learners look at a longer trajectory than 6 weeks. Okay? Don't give them semester-long classes. Give them 6-week classes. Most adults, because of the many responsibilities they have to family, to work, to community, they might be able to manage a 6-week endurance feat in terms of turning up someplace on a regular basis, a couple of times a week in a particular place and time. They can't get much beyond that. They can keep other things at bay for 6 weeks, but they can't keep everything at bay for longer than that. That's number one. Number two, what happens in online learning, especially cohort-based online learning. Cohort-based online learning means that you have a classroom of people who talk to each other as well as interact with what's called the facilitator. The facilitator is different from an instructor. In the case of the kind of online learning I have designed for low literate learners, I have fully and completely designed the course. It's in the can, but it's a live, active can. And most of the learning happens when the learners are talking to each other in the class. So, for instance, we were just talking about what kinds of prompts get people to dialogue. The kinds of prompts that get people to dialogue with each other are the kinds of prompts that are controversial or that don't have a single correct answer. So in one of our online courses for low literate readers and writers, we have them talking about whether they'd ever felt something unfair happen to them at work or to a friend or a colleague or a relative. And what was it? What occurred? Why do they think it was unfair? What was done to try to repair whatever the hurt might have been? And what should have been done, or what would they do differently as a result of this? So we're taking them through a set of rational steps in creating an argument for what they believe should have happened or why it was not fair. And it's part of learning how to think logically and rationally, and it's also how to write that way. Anyway, so that kind of discussion goes on in my online courses. So what I've done is I've created a myPLACE project, which stands for something like Philadelphia Literacy and Career Education. I don't know. We made it up. We've created 3 campuses in 3 major high poverty, high access through public transportation campuses. And those campuses are there for intake. It used to be that when I got to the Mayor's Commission on Literacy, I would listen in on the phone conversations my staff was having. And a caller would call, and the staff person would say, well, okay, I'll see if I can find you a place to go to get instruction. And they'd give them 3 more phone numbers to call, and they'd hang up. And I'm saying, no. I'm used to higher ed. Somebody expresses interest in education, we grab hold of them by the neck, and we don't let go until they've left something in their will, okay? How many of you have never had to update your alumni association about where you have moved? How many of you get mail and calls from, to donate without having to ever explain, oh, I no longer live at that address, because they find you, right? They track you down. And they are going to squeeze that last dollar out of you. You're going to have to leave something in the will, or they're never going to let you go. So that's what I'm doing here. I created a system. It's called a student information system. It's the same system your alumni association uses to keep track of you and your money. So I could keep track of the adults in the city. And I've used technology to do this. So now when they call us, we pre-register them for an appointment to get a test, get assessed for their level of literacy. And the most important thing that we can do to find out what can you do, what can't you do, what kind of class or tutoring or online, face-to-face online, is going to be best for you. And we're doing this citywide. We have 24 partner agencies that list their courses in our online catalog. And the folks at myPLACE campuses will assess you, and they'll say, oh, okay, you're reading it and writing at about a 7th grade level, but your math is at a 4th grade level. These are the courses I want to put you into. Where do you live? What's convenient? Can you get to this place? So I'm creating an open university for low literates throughout the city of Philadelphia. Okay? Got that? All right. So in the pilot phase, 2,901 learners showed up. Now, you have about 5,000 students here, and how many administrators manage them? Think about this. I'm doing this with 5 full-time people and 1.5 people at each of these campuses. This is scary. This is scary. By the way, we didn't advertise. They turn up. People always say, well, how do people know that they need to get education? They know. They failed an employer test. They don't have a GED. They know they're getting nowhere in the economy. It's a no-brainer. And they know why they're getting nowhere in the economy. They're being turned down for apprenticeships. They're being turned down for on-the-job training. They're being turned down for everything. And it's because the kinds of jobs that they thought they could do have simply disappeared from this country. We give them case management, we give them the assessment, and we attach a learning coach to each of these learners. So this is somebody who's going to be looking at their transcript and deciding where they should go next after they take their first courses. And they can take courses on the ground or in the cloud, and that's going to change because I have created a suite of courses at the levels that are most often needed. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. By doing that suite of courses, I have increased the number of seats publicly funded in the city of Philadelphia by 43%. Remember that federal and state dollar figure I showed you earlier? So I've already increased it by 43%, and the sky's the limit. I have no limitation but how much it costs me to pay a facilitator to offer as many sections of my courses as I have demand and need. Everybody assessed at our campuses is guaranteed a first class. And the first class is a self-paced electronic class that they do in the lab at the campus called Introduction to Adult Learning and Careers. We teach computer skills. We do a self-diagnostic of what they can do. If they can't hold a mouse, we start there. If they can do a little bit with Word, we start from there and ask them what they would like to learn next, and then they take 3 lessons and improve their digital skills. And of course, as they do the course, they're improving their skills because they're using the equipment. We teach them adult study skills. The most important adult study skill is where and when are you going to set aside time every single week, 10 to 15 hours of your life for your learning. It's the most important thing that the adult needs to do. They need to find a quiet place and make sure that it's regular and they have at least 2 hours in a block 3-4 times a week in order to do the learning they need to do. And then we do a career search and they start defining what their career goals are. And most low literate adults don't think in terms of careers, they think in terms of jobs. So we're doing a shift in their thinking to think about, what do I already know? What do I enjoy doing? What kind of a person am I? And what would be a starting place to a career that would eventually support my family and one that I could grow with as my life went along? And getting them to do those things. They post all of that in their learning accounts, and they can go back and monkey with it anytime they change their mind. I know I still don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up, so that's okay. But we're getting them on a pathway. They see where they are now, and they see what their next step is going to be to begin to get on that road. Some more data, and by the way, I glory in this data because these data, which have only been collected since late January this year, are the first time that I really have an in-depth look at the low literate populace in Philadelphia. 1,089, we made appointments to go to a campus for assessment, and 703 showed up. Now that's not unusual, and that happens in college admissions too, okay? That you'll have, they call it the funnel. You start with inquiries, and then they're supposed to come for a campus tour, and you're down to 703. So that's typical. Our goal for this fiscal year, which started July 1, was 1,548 assessed, and we achieved 50% of the goal at the end of September. I'm scared by the numbers. The numbers are really frightening. Again, we haven't advertised this. People just show up. And we have enrolled 655 learners in our face-to-face classes in our partner agencies. And the myPLACE campuses are just enrolling all of the people who walk into their campuses in our program. 93 learners had taken an online course as of a fully online course as of whenever these data were pulled together. And Emily, when did I mail this to you? Would have been about then, about a month ago, so it'll be a higher number now. And 218 had completed the introductory course at that time. So you can see our numbers narrow down. But there's a very important thing about this. So if Sandra missed her appointment, I know she's going to be back in 6 months, wanting another one. But then when Sandra comes back, I'll say, naughty, naughty. I have you here. That's you. You missed your appointment, or you didn't finish your intro course. I need you to go back to that campus and finish the intro course, because I can't do anything with you until you've done that, okay? And this is your last chance. And the reason it's your last chance is behind you are 499,999 adults waiting for your spot. I can't waste my money on you anymore, okay? So this is a very important thing, is that we're not cherry picking, it's just desperation city here, because the size of this is so huge, I can't afford no-shows to pop up again on my radar screen. So now I know who you are, and I'm going to hang on to you. So at the pace we're going, we will have accumulated about 8,000 registered adults by the end of the fiscal year. Those who read at 4th grade or higher and who can hold a mouse can all take the intro course, everybody at that level or higher. And for the fully online cohort classes, something that we discovered is 67% of the people who come to us for help with literacy are reading and writing between the equivalent of 4th and 8th grade. Okay, so everybody talks about GED. Most of those 67% are at the lower end, at the 4th and 5th grade level. And remember, I was saying fractions is a make or break with the numeracy. Numeracy, everybody's scores slip. The highest level, ready to prepare for the GED, which is the high school equivalent, we only, at the moment, are seeing 5% of the people who come to us who can start preparing for the GED because they're reading well enough, and only 3% who can start preparing for the math part of the GED. All right? Now, this is something else you can talk to people about. All of the funders, starting with the feds and going to everybody who's in the business of funding and supporting literacy in this country, keeps talking about low-hanging fruit. And I keep saying, there isn't any. You cannot go looking for GED completers within 1 year. It isn't there. The folks are not functioning that high. They're functioning much lower. 4th to 6th is really where the majority of the people are. Now, they may even have a high school diploma. But here's what happened. When they went and got that high school diploma, that was 15 years ago, and they went and they drove a forklift truck in a warehouse. And they haven't had to read and write, and they haven't had to do math. They just had to know how to drive the forklift truck and move packages around, okay? Well, now that job's been automated, and there's one person in the warehouse, not 20, and that person's using scanning devices and entering data into a machine, into a computer, to tell the machine where to pick up and drop the packages. So this guy, he's not functioning at a high school level, even though he went to high school and completed it. I'm also preparing a test prep course because a lot of people are getting slammed by tests when they're not expecting them. And they're not ready to take a test unless I can give them a booster that refreshes their memory of reading complex text and doing mathematics and some other skills. And that's true for community college entrance tests. The Community College of Philadelphia sends me 1,000 applicants every year who place so low they can't even go into their developmental classes. And I know that all I need to do is whip them back into shape. Oh yeah, all right, this is trig. I know how to graph that. I know how to read this graph. I know how to do this stuff. I can whip them very, very quickly. I just need to get a chance to do that before they turn up at community college door, before they try to get the apprenticeship, and before they go to a so-called employer interview. They're not going for an interview, they're going for a test. Okay? And that's something we can help them with. And we also can detoxify test taking for people. People freeze up when they're confronted. And also we can help them with the computer skills because all this stuff's on computer. So if they've never used a computer, we can help it. So the 4th campus will open in January inside the Philadelphia prison system. And I told you that in the community, 67% were testing at the intermediate level, 4th to 8th grade, and 23% were testing in the community at 0 to 4th grade level. Meaning anything below 4th grade, you're not reading. Okay? Anything below 4th grade, you're not doing math. You don't even know arithmetic. So functionally, you're not functioning at all in our economy. In the prison, the test shows 38% of the prison population in the city of Philadelphia is testing below 4th grade. It's a no-brainer. Why are they in jail? There's no other way of functioning. 42% tested 4th to 6th grade levels. So 18% of the prisoners in our jails are testing below 6th grade. Okay? It tells the whole story of what's going on there. Every year, 37,000 of these prisoners come back into the community, and we're spending $35,000 a year to keep each one of them in jail for a year. You know, I only need about $3,500 to $4,000 to get them up to snuff. Wouldn't you rather give me the money? The city of Philadelphia spends $1.5 billion on the courts, on public safety, on parole, on all of that. I would like them to spend $55 million on my program, and I've asked the mayor for that. He has not responded yet. Okay, and now, reading exercise. You can't read what's up there. If you would turn to this slide, and it's hard to read, I'd like you all to spend a couple of minutes and read this slide. All right, so silent sustained reading if you need a copy of it. So let me ask you, what did you see? Tell me what you see.
A lot of improvement. Not perfect, but better.
Not perfect.
But better.
Much better. Anything else? Anybody else notice anything? It goes from next to incoherent to logical flow. Yeah, a couple of mistakes. By the way, we teach all of our learners how to use spell check and grammar check. Okay? And it's really good because instead of having them get some complicated set of rules of grammar, what spell check and grammar check does is it says there's something wrong here. And they see what spell check and grammar check are suggesting as a correction. And once they've been doing that a fair amount, they are going to get it about what kinds of things. For instance, fragments, sentence fragments will be picked up by grammar check all the time. And this is really helpful for the adult learner to see that and use it. So we use it as a learning tool. We don't spend a huge amount of time telling them how to correct for sentence fragments, because that gets us into that whole difficult business of explaining about clauses and phrases and all that kind of stuff. And spell check and grammar check actually really, really work to help people see, oh, this is a fragment, what's missing? I don't have the verb. I didn't close the loop on this sentence. Let me figure out how to do that. So that's part of it. And we're teaching logic as well. We walk them through how to write a paragraph. And you'll see in our online classes that people just start going. We also are teaching soft skills, what the workforce system calls soft skills. So when they enter a discussion, we explain to them, we hear the instructions. So here's the prompt. This is what we want you to post in your first posting. Due on Monday by 10 p.m. And then on Wednesday, we want you to go back in and comment on 2 other writers' posts. First, say something nice about the post and address the writer by name. Those 2 things set off the tone of the conversation and get it moving in the right direction. I have not seen any nastiness whatsoever in our online discussions because we simply told them to do that. And they're told to do that 18 times in 6 weeks. I'm quite convinced that at the end of the course, they're more likely to be nice and say, Sandra, I enjoyed your story about learning how to cook. And she's going to say back, Judith, that was a very kind thing to say. So we're teaching those skills. We're teaching promptness. It's asynchronous during the week, but you got to get it done by certain dates and times. And by the end of the week, 11:59 p.m. Saturday night, is your last chance to get your project for the week submitted. We do peer review. The adults, there's a very basic thing here. I'm treating them like grown-ups. I'm not treating them any differently than I would treat anyone whose intellect I respect. And they warm to that, and they're doing just fine. Not everybody, but a lot of folks. And no, there is not a type of person that does well online and a type of person that doesn't. Online is a very convenient way for busy people, busy adults, to do their studying because no one's requiring them to be in a particular place at a particular time. So this stuff is amazing and exciting. I'm thrilled. I had one learner who said in her evaluation of her 4th grade reading and writing class, she says, I've always been ashamed to let anyone see my writing because it was so bad. But now I've learned that to make my writing better, I have to share it with other people. Ta-da! That's it. She doesn't need to learn another thing. She gets it. She totally gets it. Share with your spouse, share with your kids, share with your friend, share in a safe environment. And then after you've fixed the stuff they asked you questions about or didn't understand, that's the moment for turning it in or handing it over. So the most important thing you can learn in school. So who are our people? This slide, and I won't go through the details, but gives you a sampling of where the people are now, what they're doing for a living, and what their goal is. And they have to get from this side of this is what we took out of their career pathway plans. A fruit wholesale warehouse person, he dropped out of school, and he'd like to get auto body and related repairs as something to do for a living, because the warehousing industry is completely transforming. There are jobs, but you need a bachelor's degree to get them. Okay, so the dropouts aren't getting those jobs anymore. I want to prove to my boss I can be a manager. I love it. Okay, but he's got to get the credentials. He can't do it unless he's got the credentials and the skills, and so on. Audrey, she had her GED when she came to us because she was testing too poorly to get into community college. She took one 4th grade level reading and writing class, and because she did it using a computer, she got confidence enough to go back and reapply to community college, and she got in. Okay, so she did much better on her testing as a result of simply having those skills improved by 6 weeks of steady work using those skills. I know she's going to go far. She's an amazing woman. So these are the success stories. For every one of these people, their success, they can move ahead. The cost of this, all of our costs combined, is about $580 per person when you combine everything that we need to do to get somebody from into the system, pay for the electronic software, pay for the coaching, pay for all of that sort of stuff, and through a class. I think that we can move a lot of people placing at that low intermediate up to an 8th grade level within a year. And 8th grade's good enough to get into certain certification programs. These aren't high-level careers, but they're good careers. They are careers like becoming an LPN or something like that, that might move you even further. We've also had a lot of people come to us and take a couple of classes. There's one that Mimi Starks, that I think is on our next slide. She went, when I did these slides and sent them over here, we didn't hear the whole story. She took our first course, scoring 4.5, took one 6-week course. She post-tested 7th grade, and she needs to get up to 8th grade to get into her training program. But now she's telling us, I think that I know how to do this now. In other words, I know how to learn. I want to go past that 8th grade level. I want to get into a better program. I want to eventually go to college. So this is also something that's happening with these learners, is that they're proving to themselves they can learn. They're proving to themselves that they get it. Oh, I got to share my writing. Yes. These are those aha moments that you want these folks to experience and to understand how they're going to progress in their lives. So Mimi is amazing. We have not done a huge amount of post-testing yet. One of the reasons that we are accelerating these learners so rapidly is the courses are based on the adult equivalent of Common Core standards. So for instance, in the math courses, 4th grade math starts with very, very basic number sense, but starts to solve for x by the end of the course, starts to get into geometry by the end of the course. And in 5th grade, we do the usual fractions and decimals and those wretched measurements. But we also do plane geometry, and we do linear algebra. So when the folks are testing so well, it's because they've actually, the tests are on the old system and not on the new Common Core. And the Common Core really does move you very rapidly into being able to do this stuff. So we're looking for a lot more stories like Mimi's. And what we're doing is cost effective, it's scalable. I can have as many cohort sections as I've got dollars for. Just a matter of paying a bunch more facilitators to do it. And that's a very, very low cost. We can enroll about 20 people in a cohort and expect about 15 to finish. And that is the goal. And if I have another 15 show up, I'll run another class. We run them year round, 6 times a year. The whole suite runs, and we can have as many sections as people will give me dollars for. There will be a basket collecting money. Investing in adult education pays. They pay back. Every adult who comes out of this program and gets a job is going to get off public assistance and start paying taxes. Now, when they get off public assistance, we can spend more money on our public schools. We can spend more money on our parks. We can spend more money on our infrastructure. Okay? We can spend less money on jail. Think of how much money is locked up because these folks are not paying taxes. And they're going to pay taxes not just the first year they get out of my hands. They're going to go on doing it for decades. Now, isn't that a nicer picture than decades of their being on my tax dollars on assistance? They don't want that any more than I do. So the payoff is huge, and we can change our picture. So I'll stop there. Is that about right? And invite your questions. Sir.
Is there something structural about the education system in Finland that is not applicable to our country so that we could never improve the way they have, or is it just?
I think, I think it's the will. It's the Finnish will to look at a problem and make a decision. And you're going to think this is the craziest example. Some years back, not very long ago, about 10 years ago, the Finns decided that they wanted to make a mark on international culture. And how could they do that? Was it Finnish art or Finnish music, or what was it that they could contribute? And they decided they could set out to produce high quality conductors. And they did. You will now find a very large number of unpronounceable Finnish names conducting orchestras all over the world. So it was the will to do it, a decision. We are who we are. This isn't good enough. What can we do? How can we advance our nation? And they just up and did it. Now, the business about diversity and so on, they got the laps. They don't like them. Everybody's got their group that they don't care about. Everybody's got that. But so I don't, it's a matter of will. Really a matter of will. What do we want to do? And we just can't let all these people sit around unemployed for decades, because they have a very bad habit. They go on living for decades. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Way back at the beginning, when you were going through who is this population, you talked about the fact that blacks and Hispanics were way overrepresented. But at the same time, you also talked about immigrants and how they were such, perfect, came out with wonderful results. So can you say something about the Hispanic population that explains why they haven't been more successful at acting more like immigrants than at the bottom?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that once you're now looking at a majority of the Latinos in this country, Hispanic population in this country now being second and third generation. So you're going to see a huge increase in the college going and et cetera. And for a lot of those families, first in family to go to college is a very hard thing to do. But if you're now into the third generation, it's not so hard. So I don't really know the details on that, but that'd be a good piece of research to do in the PX study. You could go and parse that. Yes?
Besides the collection basket, where do you get funding now?
The mayor gave me $1 million. I spent it. I am... He once asked me, he stopped me once on, at a meeting, and he said, this was like a year after I started working. He says, so how much better is our literacy rate right now? And I said, oh my God, it's worse. You know, because every year the city dumps 6,000 people on the streets without the high school diploma to add to the numbers, and only 1,500 GEDs are given out in the city of Philadelphia every year. Do the arithmetic. So we're not doing better, we're doing worse. And then he asked me, you know, well, what would it take to do better? And I did the numbers. And I said $55 million a year. I would need an institution the size of the Community College of Philadelphia. And I would not hire 600 administrators to make it run either. I guarantee you that. I would make sure that there was plenty of space for people to learn. I have funding from a number of private foundations, and we just got a Department of Justice grant, which is going to be a study of reducing recidivism among the highest risk population to recidivate. And that happens to be a population that lives in 3 zip codes in North Philadelphia. And that's, of course, you know, ground zero for low skills, low literacy, high criminality, et cetera. So Department of Justice, we're applying, and this is very interesting. There's no money in the Department of Education for low literate adults. None. The money's all in Department of Labor, Department of Agriculture. Why agriculture? Because that's where SNAP comes from. That's where food stamps come from. So, and for a big sum of money from SNAP, they want to have fewer people out there getting food stamps. How can we fix this? Educate them. So the answer is always education, whether it's Department of Agriculture, Department of Labor, Department of Justice. The only place that doesn't seem to be the answer is the Department of Education. Would somebody please explain that to me? They're not in the business of educating low literate adults. Yeah, they figure, okay, they dropped out of high school, we're done. Not so much. Sandra.
So you say that the project is scalable, and I'm thoroughly convinced that it is. Do you have the time or the resources to work at the scalability and, you know, get other cities involved?
Yes, we're hoping to make a presentation at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. The work in the prisons has sparked a lot of interest, and the state commissioner of prisons has, she wants to drag me around the state to talk to all of the state prison people. I'd like to get a pilot into this, a nearby state prison just to see what the mechanics of getting it to work. The work in the prisons is really complicated because you got to have access to internet. Now, with limits. We can't give prisoners access to internet to do the stuff that got them there. We got to give them access to the internet just for a few things. So it's a very easy problem to solve. What you do in the prisons is you blacklist all URLs except the ones you want prisoners on. So it's really easy to do. It's technically very, very easy to get this in. Getting prison authorities to accept that that is possible, that's the hard part. So I'm interested in getting a lot of other, and through this Department of Justice funding, which is the Second Chance Act, I know we're going to get a lot of publicity and a lot of play in justice circles around the country through doing that. So yeah, we'll be moving forward with it, and what we'll do is we'll increase to any region, any institution that's interested at whatever it is that costs us to do that. So we're not going to make money, but we'll at least pay for the services. Yeah?
Do your adult learners need computers in their homes?
That would be ideal. That is a big problem with this. We also manage public access computing centers throughout the city of Philadelphia. My office we have 51 public access computing centers paid for by the city. And we also open computer labs. One of the things that's been marvelous is we got the faith community together recently. And one of the biggest contributions the faith community can make is that many of them have computer labs in their churches. And they are making those available for people in their neighborhoods to come in and study. And the good thing about the churches is that they are open for business outside of business hours. And they're secure places Wednesday nights, Thursday nights, whenever choir practice is going on, et cetera, and Sundays, of course. So that will be a very, very good place for a lot of our people to go and feel safe and be able to do their work. So we're working with them. Yeah?
Don't you think you need to work with the lower education, not teaching to the lowest common denominator so people don't get to the point where they need to be in your program?
Well, I tried that for 30 years. I didn't fix that. I didn't win. It's an issue of poverty. It's an issue of poverty. You can make a lot of difference in small places, but you can't solve what's at base. I remember when I first got into the school reform business, I met a principal in one of the elementary schools in Philadelphia. And he told me that his student turnover was 125% a year. Yeah. By April of each school year, no one was in his school who had been there in September. Now, why do you not learn how to read? You don't learn how to read if you're not learning from a teacher for more than a couple of months before your parents are moving to get away from the rent collector. Okay? And stuff like that. So there's chaos in the lives of these kids. And, I can't solve the 125% turnover unless I can put the parents to work. So reform for schools, it occurred to me, had to be at that adult level. And also, how can you break this cycle of poverty? Can we break it? Can we, I go around saying, I want to turn all of the people in Philadelphia into the middle class. All right? That's what school is. It's middle class. All right? Yes, ma'am.
When I first got into education, I was in adult literacy, so this is in the early 90s. So part of what I heard you say is there's a whole generation of people who are now in the same boat as, when Barbara Bush, for instance, was doing her big adult literacy push. What are you seeing and hearing that's different? Is it the intervention of technology only, or what are people saying now that's going to make this work where other things haven't for 20 years?
This can't work at scale without significant support. I mean, that's the reality. We can do something. We can make a dent in this 36 million. We can help, but we can't do it on $1 million a year, or even $1.5 million, or $2 million a year. I only have a demonstration here. This is one of the things you could do to, and one of the things I am doing is I'm leveraging the scarce resources. So one of the things that happens in my electronic registration system, I can look in there and see that a class, a face-to-face class at one of our agencies, started full with 20 learners, and it now has 15 learners, and it's 2 weeks later. I want to shove 5 more people into that room who are scoring well enough to do that right now, because we already paid for that teacher. I want to stop wasting classroom space. So we can do things like that if we have an organized registration system like the one that we have. But there's limits. There's limits. The other thing about adult literacy is that the literacy instruction of the instructors are very ephemeral. There's no future in this. You don't make a living at this. Nobody does. It's extremely hard. The dollars are scarcer and scarcer all the time. So I'm almost at a point where we do a lot of professional development for teachers of adult basic, ESL, et cetera. I'm not sure that's a good investment. I'm not sure, because they're out of the business in 5 years. That's the turnover. They don't stay. And then there's no institutional memory of what they might have learned. So there's a lot of endemic problems. One of the things you need to all know is adult literacy is not regulated anywhere. None of the states regulate it. Okay? So education is the most highly regulated industry in America. Those of you who are educators know that. Okay, you have to have a license to teach. You have to refresh it. You have to do professional development. You have to do this. You have to do that. The state tells you what to teach, when to teach it, how to teach it, all that stuff. Up, down, and sideways. You're regulated to a fare thee well. And adult literacy is a free-for-all. It's the Wild West. Anyone can hang up a shingle and start teaching. It's very disheartening. I've been in some really badly taught classrooms because folks mean well and they want to do good and they don't have a clue how to teach. Okay, so I have concerns about that. I don't love regulation. Honest to Pete, I don't love it. I never met a regulation I couldn't work my way around, you know? That's the challenge. It's fun. How can we beat them at this game? But something needs to be there, but there's no point in doing it because the minute you start trying to say you need a license to teach or you need to prove your ability to teach or whatever, then those volunteers will disappear and we need them because we ain't got nothing else. Sir? They all want to go home or they want the cookies.
Well, you were speaking about, low-hanging fruit and the difficulty of, the adult learners getting a time and a place to study and so forth. I mean, I guess you're already doing work in the prisons, but just if you release them 2 months early, that's paid for the program, the $4,000, right? You know what I mean?
That's right.
Just, okay, here's your incentive. You'll get out
That's
early.
right.
The prison,
Well, by the way,
incentive for like a cooperating because they're going to save money by not keeping this person locked up anymore.
well, one of the things that we are going to do is we're going to let the parole officers and judges know when somebody has made an educational gain in prison, and that will affect their conditions of parole. I think that it will be a really big help. So if we can show that, we can get more prisoners who are inside to voluntarily do more education. They
have nothing but time. They have nothing but time. They can study all they want, right?
A captive audience. Yeah. But getting them to do it, usually, we had one learner, and this is a horrifying story. We're fixing this in Philadelphia. You need to pay attention to doing that everywhere you live. This judge had required a parolee to get his GED within 90 days. He came to us. We assessed him first grade reading. Now, what the judge did is not constructive. He lost it. He went berserk when and we tried to explain to him what his test score meant. And he said, okay, I'm just going to have to go right back to jail. And that's what's going to happen. He's going back to jail so we talked to the judges and say, please stop saying stuff like that. You can't make it, first of all, you can't make him get a GED in 90 days, even if he were GED ready. If he had 4 tests under his belt and just had 1 more to pass, maybe 90 days would be reasonable, but not really. But you can't do that, and we can't guarantee him a seat in a program. What if there's no seat? You're making him, as a condition of his parole, go get some education, but there might not be a place. So we're changing that too. We have to inform judges, we have to inform parole, we have to educate everybody. What's the reality? This guy's reading first grade. He's not reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. I know that it wasn't good news that you brought, except the good news was that you have the will and the skills to make a difference, and we hope that that is definitely scalable. And you'll help us to scale. Thank you. For the rest of us, you're off duty, except for those who are still in the Russian class. How many are in that class? Oh, practically everyone. Okay. So when you finish that, you'll have a little respite, and by the end of the year, we hope to have your spring brochures in hand. And some things start in February, so that means you have to sign up quickly. And I know that you'll like what's coming your way. Thank you again, all.